All right, Tom, we are live. So far, there aren't any viewers at the moment, so we'll wait here in just a little bit. You'll be able to see the viewers as well. Do you see that in the bottom right corner? It says Pro Hangout, October 7th, 0 viewers. All right, so we'll wait here for just a little bit and see who is able to make it. Yeah, and that's fine. Okay, so right now I have 5 viewers.
Oh.
Yeah, so that jumped pretty quick. I think it just has to give it a little bit of time to load.
Are we going to be able to see their like a thumbnail of them or?
No, but we will be able to see their questions. So on that top left side, the like where that screen share button is, there's a Q&A button.
Oh, yeah.
And that shows us their questions and answers.
Okay.
So for those that are watching right now, if you had prior questions and answers to this Hangout, go ahead and start writing your questions now. We'll answer your questions throughout the webinar. If Tom starts explaining something and you have a question, definitely feel free to ask your questions then, and we'll get those answered. But we'll just wait here for just a little bit longer for everyone to show up here. All right. Let's see here. Okay. All right, Tom, are you ready, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, awesome. All right, welcome everybody to the Pro Hangout. It's this is the October Hangout. We will most likely be doing these bi-weekly. Just depends on how it all goes. But as you can see, today we have a very special guest, Tom Roth. He is a professional animator who has worked for on films such as Hercules, Disney film, DreamWorks, such as Dinosaur. What other films have you worked on, Tom?
Shrek was one of the big ones I worked on, the first Shrek movie. Also, I worked on the first Scooby-Doo movie. Stuart Little was another one, and quite a few others, but those are kind of the big ones.
Awesome. That is so cool. I didn't know you did Stuart Little as well. I remember seeing that in the movie theaters. That's pretty awesome. All right. Well, very cool. So the topic today that Mr. Roth will be covering is on, we're going to be doing pre-production Anime Studio, keeping Anime Studio in mind when you're thinking about doing pre-production. So definitely, if you have any questions, like I said, use the Q&A box that you have available to you in order to ask your questions, and we will go ahead and get started.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought I'd like to talk a little bit about my interest in Anime Studio and my experience that I've had. I started back about 71, so I've been in the business for quite a long time. I'm retired now, so I can sort of indulge myself and do whatever I please. So one of the things I noticed, and I've seen a lot of videos that you folks out there have made in Anime Studio, and one of the things I noticed is that you tend to dive right into animation. You know, you tend to get right into the program itself and start creating there. So I just want to talk a little bit about what I call the pre-production process or pre-pro and the way it goes on in the big studios. Now, obviously, you know, you're not a big studio. Most of you are just individuals or maybe part of a small little studio. But anyway, I'll talk a bit about what goes on at Disney, DreamWorks, and all the other big studios. So when they're making a big feature, they have to employ the talents of many different kinds of specialists, writers, storyboard artists, directors, voice artists, character designers, animators, special effects, background people, modelers, riggers, compositor, so on and so forth. It takes an awful lot of different types of skills in order to make an animated film. So obviously, you probably have some of these skills, but so the cool thing is that you get to wear all these hats when you're starting an anime studio. You're the writer, you're the director, you're the character designer, you're the animator. You do practically everything, which is kind of neat. Um, but I think there's a tendency on a lot of people to want to start animation right away, because that's where you get your biggest kick. I think is when you see your characters starting to come to life. And in fact, that I think that's the best job of all. That's the part I enjoy the most. I still do when I do some animation and then I hit the button and play the movie, and it seems to come to life. That's what kind of hooks a lot of people um, on animation. Just seeing their characters come to life, and that's what I like to do. There's kind of two types of workers in animation. There's the animators, and that's me, and then there's the story people um, who do storyboards. They're involved in the writing process as well, and so and they're not they're more big picture people. They understand filmmaking, film grammar, and so forth. So one of the things that I advise people to do in Anime Studio, it seems like a lot of them will start designing their character right in the program itself. I prefer to start on paper and design my characters there first. As you can see over my shoulder here, I got a drawing board and so forth. And the problem with designing a character in the program is that you're then forced with the limitations of Anime Studio technically, and this may inhibit your creativity. So what I suggest is doing sketches on paper first, and then after you get something you're pretty well satisfied, scan it and then take it right into Anime Studio, and then work on top of that. Um, it's a good idea to do what are called turnarounds, um, which show front view, side view, three-quarter view, back view, and so forth, so that your character is the proportions stay pretty consistent. So anyway, I'll show you a few of my um, designs and talk about these a little bit. Let's see if this is going to work now. Okay. Hopefully, no, let's see. You probably can't see that. Hang on a second. I've got to switch screens over here. Okay. Yeah, this is a character that I've been working with for a few years that I designed. He's an old beatnik character. He's a trumpet player. And this brings me to my main point, is that when you design a character, um, you want your viewer to know pretty much who the character is as soon as they see them. In other words, uh, you have to give them an identity through whatever means, or a personality, so that people can say, oh, this is a person I can relate to. I mean, maybe they're not like me, but I know who this person basically is. And I see a lot of people that do characters. They're kind of generic, and and I think it's just because people don't put a lot of work into developing their characters. The big studios, they all have dozens of artists just in development, spending months, designing the characters. And I do that too. I draw hundreds of different versions of my characters before I settle on the final one. So let's see, that was one of them. Let me see if I can find some more. Let's see here. That was another one. of course, you know, when you pose your characters, the pose itself tells you a lot about the character. And so we're getting more into animation here, which I'll probably talk about maybe in a later webinar. But anyway, that's something that's very important. Poses and facial expressions and all that, of course, is the main way how you tell your story, basically. But I'll show you some more drawings that I did. Another thing that I want to talk about is the fact that in character design, a lot of it comes out of caricature. And when you go into the big studios, you know, and you walk through the halls, you're going to see caricatures all over the place of, you know, people that work there. And because people like at Disney or other studios, caricature is just a way of life with them. Matter of fact, they even have a big caricature contest and a big showing every year. So it's a good idea to look at caricatures. One of the places I like to go is a site called Pinterest, and I'm sure you people all know about that, because there's some great work being done. And if you know, there's stuff on storyboards, there's stuff on character designs, life drawing. It's like a treasure trove of information. You know, and there's other sites, of course, too, Tumblr and some of the other ones where you can go. And so sometimes I just like to go to Pinterest and browse a little bit, just for inspiration. You know, it really gives me some ideas, you know, as far as what other people are doing. There's some more caricatures here. So that's what I like to do, and this is a big help, you know, in character designs.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
I apologize for interrupting, but the characters that you're trying to show, the images, I think it's showing on your other screen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So if you can just drag those to that. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Just go through those pictures again.
Okay. Yeah. Here's. This is obviously, I hope you know who it is, Bill Cosby. That started out to be Mary Manilow here, but it sort of went off track. And this is just a guy I made up, you know. This is an old character actor called Arnold Stang. And let's see here. Here's an old character actor. This is, what's the rock star guy's name? I can't think of his name. Rod Stewart, I think that's him. Betty Davis. This is an old character actor called Elijah Cook Jr. He used to be in the old 1940s Humphrey Bogart movies. And of course, you've got Elvis and Walter Brennan down here. And a couple, William F. Buckley. So anyway, I'm going to close those for now. So let's see. I'm trying to think what I wanted to talk about. Let me just look at my notes a little bit here. So what the big studios use when they're let me go back to my there we go. When they're designing characters, they use archetypes, which you probably heard of. In other words, it's just the type of character, you know, and they're very, very definite formulas that all movies, live action and animator, use in types of characters. For example, you know, you have the hero type, you have the villain, you have, you know, the girl next door. There's many of these sort of stereotypical characters. So you want to think about you know, who your character really is. Okay, you want to think about what this character wants, what kind of personality he has. Um, and there's a, let's see if I can find this real quick. On let's see, that's not working. On Wikipedia, you can go, and there's a whole list of stock characters. And, you know, everybody that makes a movie is familiar with all these stereotypical characters. And they've been using these over and over and over since forever, really. You know, you can go back into ancient mythology and there, you know, it's the same story over and over again. People like George Lucas relied on mythology for doing his Star Wars movies. There's a writer by the name of Joseph Campbell who wrote a book called The Hero's Journey. And I think all screenwriters are very familiar with this book because it's a universal story about basically human nature and the cycles of events that go through their life. And they just based their movies on this pattern. So anyway, that's enough about that. I noticed something somewhere on Facebook that said that Spielberg, Ridley Scott, who I'm sure you know about him, they all storyboard their films, and before they shoot anything at all. And so that sort of brings us to the next thing that I wanted to talk about with storyboarding. If you have a fairly long form short that you want to make, it's a good idea to do a storyboard first. And in order to do that, you should be familiar with what is called film grammar. And film grammar is a series of sort of guidelines or rules for making a movie that help you tell your story. It's not terribly complicated. It can get complicated, you know, but there's just a few basic rules, and there's quite a lot of old books, websites, and that sort of thing that can teach you all about storyboards. One of the books that I kind of like, let me just get it here, is this thing called The Art of Storyboard by Don Bluth. He's a guy I used to work for years ago. He's well known for doing Land Before Time, American Tail, Secret of Nim, and so forth. And this is a pretty good book. Now, it's designed for feature films, and so, but still, the basic idea is a good idea. So anyway, let me just look at my notes a little bit here. Anyway, I recommend it because it'll stimulate your imagination, and it'll give you ideas and ways of doing things that you may not have thought of. So when you sit down to do your storyboard, you've got a script roughed out, or maybe you've recorded some dialogue, and then you have to start answering questions like, okay, what kind of a shot do I use to tell this story? You know, do I do a close-up? Do I do a long shot? Do I do an upshot? Do I do a bird's eye angle? Do I do an establishing shot? There's just a million choices that you as the director have to make. What's the best way to tell this story? And I just feel like some of the YouTube videos I've seen, there's not a lot of thought put into, you know, where do I put the camera, or what's the best way to compose this shot, or what kind of mood am I trying to put across here. So that's why you need to study, you know, a bit about film grammar and cutting. Cutting is very, very important. And when I'm talking about cutting, I'm actually talking about pacing. So, and that's another thing I noticed about a lot of these anime studio things, is that the the pacing tends to be quite slow, and this is very, very typical of younger filmmakers and animators. Is their shots kind of go on too long. So there's two problems with pacing, and that is that if you're too slow, your pacing's too slow, then you're going to lose your audience. They're going to get bored, you know, and tune you out, you know, and maybe turn off your video. On the other hand, if your pacing is too fast and the audience isn't sort of quite getting what you're trying to put across because it's too fast, and they get confused, and then they're out of the picture. You know, some people will say, well, that took me out of the picture. In other words, you want to engage them. You want to, as an animator, you want to get them to forget that they're just watching moving artwork on the screen. And if you can get some kind of an emotional response out of them, whether it's anger or excitement or sadness or whatever, that's kind of the ultimate goal in animation and filmmaking, is to get people to, you know, be drawn into your world and respond, you know, as you know. And it's quite a trick, because all they're seeing really is lines and colored shapes and that sort of thing, and of course the soundtrack and so forth. So there's one sort of rule that you need to follow in terms of the pacing of your film, and that is that the pacing should proceed at the level of the audience's perception. In other words, when you're trying to make a story point, as soon as the audience gets your story point, then you move on to the next thing. So, you know, it's a kind of a thing where you don't want to go too fast, too slow. Just make sure that they get the point, and as soon as they get the point, then you move on to the next story point. So let's see here. Another thing about the storyboards is that they can be very, very simple. You can go online and there's lots of people that put their storyboards, and they're just sketches that would take you, you know, maybe a few seconds to draw. They don't have to be good drawings at all. All I have to do is basically get the idea across, the rough composition, the sort of the camera angle, and then you would draw. I'm sure you've seen these storyboards. Draw, put your notes underneath about, you know, dialogue, action, sound effects, and so forth. And then, if it's fairly lengthy, a good idea is to make what's called an animatic out of your storyboard. And what you can do is you can scan it, then turn it into a movie, in which case you will have to time out every single storyboard panel so that timing-wise it's pretty tight. And then once you've got that movie, you can bring it into Anime Studio and use it as a template, and you just basically work right on top of that. And that's what I do sometimes. Sometimes I'll actually draw on paper some of my animation and make a movie out of it and bring it in, and then I work on top of that using Anime Studio as more like an ink and paint system to colorize. Or, you know, you can actually just start animating right away. Once you get your character designed and rigged, you don't have to do any other animation on paper. So there's a lot of different ways you can use Anime Studio. And another thing I was thinking about this morning is the fact that, as far as I know, I don't think anyone has made a feature film solely on Anime Studio. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody did that within the next few years. I think there was a Irish feature called Song of the Sea. I understand has used a lot of the scenes and some of the background elements, and some of the animation was done in Anime Studio. So in theory, there really is no reason why you couldn't make a feature film. And hopefully Anime Studio will evolve to the point where it has more tools. One of the things I'm particularly interested in, if you've seen any of my videos, is its 3D capabilities, which are extremely basic, but you can, what needs to happen, I think, is we need more 3D tools, and then that will sort of set us free, because originally Anime Studio is designed as a cutout. It wasn't really designed to even try to do 3D originally, and all you could do is you could move the bones, but only in 2 dimensions. So if we can get to the point where we can move those bones in 3 dimensions, then we'll really have something. And so that's what I'm hoping for sometime in the near future. So anyway, I'm trying to think what else I've got here.
Yeah, and just to say something, yeah, I definitely agree that 3D features would definitely be a huge feature, especially with Victor Paredes, who is like, we're all in awe to his animations.
Mm-hmm.
With his new position as, I think it was product manager or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just posted on the Anime Studio Pros Facebook group. Just like you're saying, Tom, I'm definitely seeing some feature films in the near future for Anime Studio Pro users. Simply because now we have, as far as like on the Smith Micro team, now there is someone there who is actually an animator and knows what an animator is going to need as far as features and things in order to make a feature film. I think that's something that we'll see in the very near future. I'm really excited about that, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. They, in order to really evolve their product, they have to involve people like us, you and me and all the users out there, and get their input. And because I think, a lot of these people, maybe they're marketing people or technical people, but I sometimes I wonder if they really know how to use their own product. So
Yeah,
sort of guide point the way, as to what the potential is out there.
definitely. Yeah, I want to share my screen just real quick, touching on this certain subject here. The Anime Studio Pro, the Anime Studio Pro has a Lost Marble forum that probably a lot of users are familiar with. But here, there's a specific topic here. It's going to be under your general Anime Studio discussion. I know there's been a lot of talk about this on the group itself as to where we can put ideas for future, basically for future ideas for Anime Studio. And it's under the topics, help shape the future of Anime Studio. Here, obviously you can see there's 39 pages of suggestions. And the awesome thing that I have found with the Anime Studio compared to other animation software, and I have done research looking into Toon Boom and things like that, is the developers of the software, Mike Clifton and all those guys, all his team, they actually do listen to what you are posting here. There are different things, like a huge push was frame by frame. And as you have noticed for version 11, frame by frame was something that was published in the next version of Anime Studio. So along with the group, just posting different ideas and stuff, definitely come here to Lost Marble Forum. Yeah, and this is definitely where you'll be able to post some more of your ideas. I've seen a lot of those 3D ideas posted here, and I mean, they don't go unread, that's for sure.
Yeah, I've been there many times. In fact, that's mostly how I learned what I know about Animators Studio, which frankly is, my knowledge is fairly shallow of the technical stuff, you know, and whenever I have a question, you know, I jump on the forum and there's always somebody there, you know, to help me out. So yeah, that's a great resource, I must say. So anyway, trying to think of what I wanted to talk about next. Let me just look at my notes here.
Okay. While you're looking at your notes there, Tom, there was a question, well, more so an answer from a user here, and he actually said that there is a. I'll look this up while you're looking through your notes and stuff. But Techno Ties Edit and I don't know for sure if that is a film, but it looks like he says it was made entirely in Anime Studio.
Really?
So I'll go ahead and start digging that up on the Google there.
I'd love to see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see what that is all about there.
Okay. Yeah, if we can see that here, that would be very cool. Let's see here. So well, let's see. I'm going to show you some more things here. Here's some more character designs that I did. Let's see here. I like old beatnik characters, probably because I grew up in the 50s. So I think it's kind of a fun thing. So that's one guy that I designed. But here was another. Let's see.
And then just make sure you're still on screen share there, Tom. Okay. Just wanna.
Can you see this character here?
No, it's currently. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, I forgot to switch the screen. Sorry. Okay. So now, right. Okay. There's this beatnik character there. But you know, it's like I was saying earlier. When you see a character like this, you kind of can identify who he is, you know, pretty much right away. Or, you know, he's not what you'd call a generic character. And let's see here. This is a character. I would call her Ruby, and she's a kind of an older woman. She's kind of a bag lady. You know, I think she lives in a under a. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to. There we go.
Yeah. She's an older lady, you know, and she's a little dingy in the head because she probably maybe partied a little too much back in the 60s and 70s. And so now she lives in a trash dumpster or something like that. So I like drawing, let's see here. So I like drawing expressions and so forth. So I did a few of expressions. And let's see here. Here's some more. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see. Here's some more poses that I did. Just kind of showing her attitude. I mean, when in the big studios, you know, they'll have some of the lead animators, and they'll draw loads and loads of pictures of the attitudes of the characters, so that when the other animators animate the same characters, it all seems to be consistent. So let's see what else we got here. There's some old Mickey Mouse stuff here. This is an example of what I was just talking about. Let's see. enlarge this thing a little bit. So these are very old poses, but what they do is, you know, they give some of the lead animators will do these poses, and then the other animators, you know, can have something to get ideas from. They don't necessarily copy it, you know, verbatim or anything like that, but it's great to have stuff like this. I recently did a couple of jobs, you know, with Mickey Mouse, and so they're very helpful. Let's see what else I got here. Model sheet. What is this? Oh, here. Okay. Now here's another character that I was working on recently, and I'm actually in the middle of animating this right now. He's going to be doing a dance. You know, he's going to be doing the Charleston, and he's like, you know, like 100 years old, basically. Let's see. I think there's another one here. Oh, another thing I wanted to talk about was something that they do in the big studios. You know, you might want to skip this step, but it's interesting. They do what are called maquettes, and they're like little statuettes of the characters, and I've got a few of them here. And so each animator gets one of these little statuettes so that they can get the drawing right at any angle. This, of course, is in traditional animation. And these are very handy. I'll show you some. This is another one of the characters. He's this old 100-year-old man guy that I'm animating now that I call Furbus.
Now, is that something that you sculpted, Tom?
Yeah, this one I did. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
And if you go online and you look up Maquettes, which is spelled Maquette, especially Disney Maquettes, they have sculptors there that just do fantastic work. I mean, it's just breathtakingly. The work is just amazing, and I work with some of these guys, and they're just brilliant. Let's see. Here's one of Ruby that I did, and it's not really quite finished yet. So, but anyway, these are extremely helpful, you know, for getting the angles right on the face and so forth. So here's another guy you've probably seen. This actually, I used to do a lot of Tony Tiger commercials, so this was very helpful in you know, head angles and that sort of thing. So I started to do this, and it wasn't coming out quite right, and so I asked one of the guys that worked for me to finish off, and I thought he did a pretty good job of it. So anyway, so that's the whole story on maquettes, and they're done in something called Super Sculpey, and basically you just it's pretty easy to use. There's a lot of websites where you can go that tell you about sculpting and so forth. Sometimes you have to put a metal armature inside, and you work on top of that, and then you put it in the oven and you bake it for a little bit, and then it's nice and hard, and you can paint it and so forth. So anyway,
Yeah, that's really awesome, Tom. When you are usually drawing, when you're in your sketching stage, trying to design a character, do you usually opt in for more traditional paper pencil, or do you use any drawing programs? That was a question that was asked.
no, I always start on paper.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, it's you can be a lot freer, I think, on paper. You know, if you do a bad drawing, so what? You know, just throw it away and then do another one. It's kind of like, I don't know. That's why I don't like starting directly in the program or anything like that. Um, I think it's easier to just feel free and let your imagination run wild. Do anything you like. It doesn't really cost you anything. Just and try all kinds of things. You know, all, paper and pencil are probably the cheapest things you can possibly use. So use a lot of it. So that's the way it's always been done. Um,
Mhm.
there is another program that I'm working with. I'm still kind of learning it, called TV Paint, and you have to have a Cintiq, and you you draw right on the tablet, of course, and you can actually do animation. But it's kind of the old fat. It's not vector. It's all bitmap. So you have to draw every single in between, and then you draw it rough first, and then you have to clean it up. It's a very time consuming process, and that's why I really like Anime Studio, is because you the old way is, of course, you do a drawing, then you have to clean it up, and then you have to color it. You have to scan it first, and but with Anime Studio, all you're doing is you're taking maybe one rig uh, and manipulating color shapes, and the program generates the in-betweens automatically. And that's why I think it has a great future, because the old-fashioned way is just becoming too expensive, too time-consuming, too labor-intensive to be practical anymore. And if someone could figure out a way, and this may be the way uh, to do it, I think it's conceivable that in a few years we could be seeing Disney quality animation being done in a vector-based software like this. And that's the way all TV is going. I mean, I think virtually all TV shows are in either in Flash or Toon Boom. I know a lot of my friends are learning Toon Boom. Um, I took a look at it, and I didn't really care for it. It looked awfully complicated, and the stuff that I saw in it was not terribly expensive. Plus, I don't mean expensive. It wasn't terribly impressive. I think it's like $3,000 for the program, which is 10 times Anime Studio, and so I just thought, no, I don't like this. And Flash, I hated Flash. It was so unintuitive. So anyway, any questions out there or anything?
Um, there aren't at the moment, but I definitely have some questions for you, Tom,
Yeah.
because there's been a lot that you've talked about that I've definitely learned about. So when you think about Anime Studio, what do you do from your more complex drawings that you come up with, your sketches and things like that? What do you do in order to make it more simple? Because when you're dealing with vectors, obviously it's not the same as bitmap. It's a little bit more, as far as like detail, it's hard to keep all the detail in your drawing when doing head turns and things like that. So do you have any tips for what to do to keep it simple?
Well, yeah. I mean, the problem is, it's just a lot less work. If you keep it simple. Now, I worked on a project about a year ago in Anime Studio, and it was done. It was kind of like a client situation where a friend of mine came up with a TV pilot um, that he wanted done, and he designed the characters. And I was just starting in Anime Studio, and unfortunately, I can't show it to you because um, he owns the project. He wrote it, he directed it, he recorded the voices and everything. And so he designed these characters. They had tattoos, all over, and and just a ton of detail. And it looked good. You know, I mean, it was a struggle because I really didn't know too much at that time to do it. You know, and in fact, it took me about a year to do 2 minutes of animation with the two characters.
Oh, wow.
And I wish I could show it to you, but I'm sort of under an NDA, as they say, non-disclosure agreement. But I guess I would say, you know, animation by its very nature is a very, very labor-intensive um, medium, but you're only going to get out of it what you put into it. So if you don't have any time to spare, well, I mean, you just don't have time to spare. You may have to wait till you retire to work on some of these extensive projects. So yeah, I mean, as far as making them simpler, well, if you know, one of my bosses, he's a guy named Richard Williams. Some of you might have heard of him. He's got a very good book out, which I highly recommend. All animators should have this book. It's called the Animators Survival Kit, and he and I both learned from this older animator guy, old Disney guy named Art Babbitt. Anyway, here's a little piece of advice he gave me. He says, if you do some animation that's entertaining, that is dramatic, that's interesting, that's engaging, the audience will forgive you anything. So I'm not saying your animation has to be very, very complex or detailed or anything like that. You could just do simple, very simple line work, you know, just sketches, but no color or anything like that. If it's clever, entertaining, is funny, um, dramatic, engaging, the audience will forgive you anything because
Hmm.
that's all they really care about. They want to be entertained.
Definitely.
Yeah. So a little bit of advice there.
Yeah, no, that's definitely good advice. We do have a couple more questions here, actually, Tom. All right. So this one's from one of the users. He's asked, Tom, do you have many rigs? Do you do many rigs for your characters, or do you do one rig that works for every pose?
Yeah, that's a good question. In that project that I was just telling you about, I had two rigs for each of the two characters. The one first rig was just the front-on rig, and I was able to set up head rotations, body rotations, um, and that's what I used mostly. But the storyboard called for a side view because the two characters have to talk to one another. So I had to do an entirely separate rig for the side view, um, and that was okay. The only problem is that then when they turn their heads, there's a noticeable pop in the action when they go into the profile, which I thought was kind of disturbing. But you know, at that time I didn't have the expertise to kind of make a 180-degree head rotation. But it worked okay, you know, because it was a fairly funny story and everything. It had some funny dialogue and so forth. So anyway, yeah, it would be great, you know, if you could have one rig that did everything, you know, like a kind of a Swiss Army knife rig. But I haven't seen too much of that kind of thing. I did see if you guys are familiar with the work of a Canadian guy named Gilles Charbonneau, I think that's how it's pronounced. He had a really good video on rigging a character. And did you see this one, McCoy, recently?
Let's see here. I know here. Yeah, I I call him Giles, so yeah, I don't
Okay.
know how
I
he
don't
pronounces his
either.
name.
So anyway, it's a boy, and it's a very good rig. You know, it's a fairly simple one, but it's a good one. Now, here's one thing I've seen so many times that kind of bugs me. Um, and somebody made this point in the forum. A lot of people, when they do rigs, they don't animate the shoulders. You know, as an animator, I feel like the shoulders are very expressive, and they tell you a lot about the character's mood. You know, if they're angry, you know, they could be like this. You know, or if they're bored, you know, their shoulders are down. Or if they're depressed or something like that. So I just feel like, well, I got to have shoulder animation. Well, this guy Gilles had a very nice rig where you could, the arms and the shoulder were all one uh, set of bones, basically. You know, so the character could shrug or do whatever. And so if you go into if you're designing a character, go into the bathroom mirror or something and raise your arms up and see what happens, you know, with your shoulders, because the rotation point for the shoulder actually is very deep. It's down about here, you know, near your collarbone, and I don't see that too much. So that always kind of bugged me.
Yeah. Also, answering that question, something that I have seen is, I don't know if you saw that, Tom, or if that popped up on your screen, but I was screen sharing a Giles turnaround character there. I'll put it up one more time. I think this is the one that you're referring to. Let's see here. So basically, kind of what Tom was already talking about as far as like turnarounds or with your model sheet is you want to have, like, for example, this is a 3/4. This is like the profile, the back side of the 3/4, his back turn. And yeah, kind of going along with what Tom is saying here. Something that I've saw a lot, and this has been demonstrated perfectly by Neely Dove. He did TV shows for BBC using Anime Studio, and he did an awesome job just using switch layers. And it was basically the motion that the character makes prior to the turn, whether it's like arm movement or just like his eyes darting to the side, showing the direction of where his head will be turning. I mean, that was a perfect way that he demonstrated. Because I mean, the truth of the matter is what I have found so far. I don't know, Victor Paredes, he's obviously showed some really awesome ways to take one rig to do multiple poses. But something that I have found, because I guess I'm not quite experienced yet with Anime Studio, is you basically are going to have switch layers, or not necessarily switch layers, but bone layers for every single angle. So you'll have your side turn, your 3/4 turn, and to answer that question, yeah, every single one of those turns would actually need to be rigged for those poses. Because I mean, you might have had more success than me, Tom, but I've definitely had to do more than one rig for different poses for the same character.
Yeah, the one of the problems with having more than one rig is you've got to hook up the animation, you know, so that there isn't like a bump or a pop, you know, getting from one to the other, which can be kind of tricky. You know?
Yeah.
That's interesting. There's one last thing that this is one thing I always tell animation students, and that is that you have to, in your mind, divide, you know, what you're doing in two different ways. One is knowledge of the software, and that you have to master. But the other is knowing how to animate. In other words, knowing all the basic principles of animation. And those are two different disciplines altogether. And, you know, because I think a lot of these younger people that start out, they learn a program, you know, and they think that once they know the software, that really makes them an animator. Well, the only thing that makes you an animator is really understanding how to bring a character to life. And that's another study all by itself. And maybe that's something we can get into in another webinar, you know, if people are interested in, you know, we'll see what the response is here.
Yeah. I got another question here. This is kind of going back to the storyboards.
Yeah.
Do you know of any storyboard software, Tom, that you have used, or how do you usually go about doing your storyboards?
Yeah, there is storyboard software. I think I would keep it real simple. Just get yourself a stack of, a copy paper, and usually the way it works is you have six frames. You have three on top, and then you have. I wish I had an example, but if you go onto in Google and just type in like a storyboard panel, you'll see a whole slew of them. The studios all have their own um, specialized storyboards. I mean, they're usually for sort of longer form products, um, like a TV show or something like that, or even a commercial. But and there's even stock characters that stock artwork that you can put together if you're not much of a drawer. It'll do the drawing for you. Um, but I would just sit down with a stack of copy paper and just draw your frame and then draw what you want in it. That's all you really need. And they don't have to be good drawings. Like I would say, just enough to get your point across. And the composition and everything.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, so just kind of going over what Tom said. I mean, everything that Tom has touched on is so important. These are your foundation. This is before building your house. You need a good foundation. You need something that works for everything, and that's your pre-production. That's where everything, the plans, the designs, everything come into play. So kind of going through your story and your script. Just want to touch on that real quick, Tom. So how do you, when you go to develop a story, I mean, technically when you use a story, you would think of, I mean, I would think of like a storybook with words and a narration or something like that. How many animations have you created that you would say have a story but have like no narrative?
Actually, I'm not sure what to say because to me the story and the narrative is the same thing, basically, isn't it? Maybe
Or
we're
I guess it would be like I don't know how to say it, like a dialogue or like a narrator, like narrating in the background, or
well, yeah. I mean, there are in other words, doing an animated film mostly as a mime. In other words, no dialogue, maybe no soundtrack at all, and you just tell the story through the character's actions.
there we go.
I mean, that's certainly one way to go. That would be kind of animation in its purest form, where maybe you have a little music or something like that. I I'm not so much a story person myself, really. I wish I was. I'm more of the kind of guy where, you give me a storyboard and then I create a commercial, or I animate a scene with a character or something like that. I kind of do what I'm told by the director. That in a big studio, that's the name of the game is, your job is to make the director happy. Um, so that, that's interesting in itself, but we won't get into that now.
Yeah.
Maybe later. So,
Yeah. And then so I'm just touching on just the key points that you went over here. You went over character design. What would you say, what is something that you usually start with? So I know you'll gather your ideas maybe from real people or celebrities or something like that. But if you were trying to come up with your own design, what helps you to start as far as like the shape of the character, I guess? Like, do you, me personally, I actually do shapes like a square or a circle or a triangle.
mhm.
How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Shapes in character design are very important because they help tell you who the character is. I mean, if you want a really bad guy, I mean, you're going to have him have a massive sort of chest area, you know, and huge arms and so forth. Maybe no neck, you know, and a small head. So yeah, and obviously, let's say you're doing some girl animation. Well, shapes get real important there. So like that Furbus character that I did. Yeah, it's based on very simple shapes. In other words, and there's kind of almost a science to all this. Did I mute out here? Because I'm getting a mute thing here. I guess not.
No, you're still there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That was me.
Okay. So yeah, most character designers, they try to use very simple shapes. And so this guy Furbus, let me go back and see if I can get this up again. Let's see. Can you see this Furbus, or am I not? Let's see here.
Yep, it's there. Yep.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, his torso is just a big, almost like a sphere. You know, it's a big blob, and then he's got these skinny toothpick arms and legs for contrast, and he has no neck whatsoever. He's got these kind of big clunky shoes, and I think that's what makes it a funny character, is because it's all based on contrast. You know, where you have this toothpick legs and arms, you know, and a big plump body kind of thing. So yeah, I remember one of the Disney animators telling me that when you're designing characters, you don't want to have what's called a basket of apples. In other words, you have just a bunch of circles. You know, a circle for a head, a circle for a nose, a circle for an eyes, you know, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. You want to have a lot of interesting shapes, which kind of tend to contrast with one another. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, and there are a lot of people that are a lot better than I am at designing characters. But yeah, like you're saying, shapes are very, very important.
Yeah, definitely. Going along with that, something that I actually remembered, I'll pull it up real quick here. The Smith Microblog did a article on me. I guess it was just based off of one of my courses that I teach about character design. But yeah, going along with that, I mean, when I think about with Anime Studio, I always think in shapes. And I would have to say this is because of you, Tom. The one time I went to your studio there, and I brought over my big chicken animation drawing, and I was like, I don't know how to make a side turn out of this for the life of me. And it was actually you who told me, think of it as in shapes. So the shape of the character that I had at the time, his head was kind of a football shape. Okay, so if you turn a football on its side, what's the side of its head going to look like? So I would definitely say when you're thinking of character design, I mean, this is a terrible example, but because this is actually when I, like for me, for some reason, I actually draw a lot inside Anime Studio itself. I used to be a really big on paper pencil drawer, but ever since I picked up on Anime Studio, I always drew. This is basically how I would start. So I would have my shape, and then I'd go and I'd add my points, adding my points, my curves. So I'd take and I'd just add points to here and curve that up, and that would basically give me that result there. And then with the hide edge tool in Anime Studio, I would go through and I actually hide the edges so that it takes away that shape look. So now, I mean, you can still kind of see a square or some macaroni circle, anything right there. And then I'd go through and I'd hide those shapes. But then the next step is you define the features. Okay, so that kind of looks like something. What do I want to look like from there? Okay, I'll give it some hands. And then the last step being to add your detail. So would you say that's something that you would recommend for, because I know there's those that, I mean, that are really good artists and those that call themselves, or that would say that they're not very good artists. When drawing an Anime Studio itself, what is this something that you would recommend doing as well, Tom? I mean, this is what works for me, but.
Well, yeah, no, I would say at the end of the day, it's what you deliver, with your end product. Um, and if that works for you, if you like working that way, fine. There's no really one way to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
You just, basically it's whatever you do to deliver the goods, and that's basically it. So no, I wouldn't have any problem with that. But what I was thinking was, now there's one thing that I've heard for years and years and years and years about character design, and that is what they call straights against curves. And all the old animators will tell you about that. In other words, as you're posing or designing a character, you want to pose, find some way of making straight lines, not perfectly straight lines, but almost straight, sort of curving a little bit against curves.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives you that'll improve your drawing quite a bit, because there's contrast. In other words, you want to have contrast in sizes, contrast in shapes, and contrast between curves and straights. And that's something to think about quite a bit. So anyway, that's for now. I guess that's about all I can think of.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's really good. Yeah, I've actually remember hearing that somewhere before. I was watching some artist on YouTube, and he said something to that extent to kind of avoid straight lines. I mean, when you're doing the contrasting, really good. But he used a lot of curves, is something that I noticed
Yeah.
with a lot of his designs. Yeah.
Yeah, it might not be a bad idea to like go into Pinterest and pick out some of the um, artwork that you like, the character drawings, and just sort of analyzing it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of try to take it apart and try to figure out what makes it tick. And it's that find the contrasts there um, in the shape. But yeah, shape is very important.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. All right. And then just looking over the last two things, recording voice talent. I mean, it's the same type of thing, I would say. I mean, I've done it. Anime Studio has its little recording feature as well. That works pretty good. I mean, you can modify your voice, or you can also download an open source software called Audacity. Given you have the recording equipment, I would say, along with that, Anime Studio definitely provides that ability as well for recording. Just going over the stages of the pre-production here. But as far as that, is there anything else that you would want to touch on, or that you think you might have missed, Tom?
I can't really think of anything offhand. As far as
Okay.
voice recording, I haven't. Usually, my position where I was, by the time I get onto a project, that's all been done before. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of an art in itself. Is recording the voice talent. And by the way, for one of my little projects there, I got Audacity, because you mentioned it,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted some dialogue, so I poked around um, on the internet, and I found some funny dialogue. It was some kid ranting about something, which I thought was very funny, and so I thought, well, I'm going to swipe this, and but I thought I don't want him to know it's his. Not that he's going to find out, but I thought maybe I'll change it. So I took it into Audacity and I gave it a higher pitch, so it sounded
Mm-hmm.
a bit different. So yeah, that I like that Audacity software. It you can sort of in effect sort of stylize your voice, so it doesn't sound quite so ordinary. It sounds like a real character.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Something that I would say to Anime Studio users to avoid is, I know it's mighty tempting to kind of go like the helium style voice on the Anime Studio animations, but it's definitely overdone, I would have to say. I mean, I would definitely try to even test with just real people, just to try to get different voice, uh, I guess like pitches and tones. I know personally, I tried with, I had my wife, she recorded, it was something for my nieces for their birthday, but I had her record her actual voice, and then I changed the pitch of it in Audacity, and it sounded exactly like a child. It was an animation that I made called Smiley Kid or something like that. But yeah, I would say definitely for the Anime Studio users. I mean, even record your real voice. There's nothing to be ashamed of as far as recording your real voice. I have a couple of my own videos where I even try doing like a British accent with my real voice, and it just sounds terrible. But going with that, I would just say definitely experiment a lot. Don't use that higher pitch frequency setting on the Anime Studio software itself, because I mean, I would definitely have to say that's overdone. I see that a lot on the YouTube animation examples. So definitely experiment, just like Tom was saying. Even take a voice of a character from a YouTube video, as long as you don't get in trouble, and change the pitch of it, whether it's a higher pitch or a lower pitch. It'll definitely give it a unique sound there.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that I think in a lot of cases, the old Warner Brothers cartoons, Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd and Daffy Duck and so forth, I think those are sped up voices somewhat. It sounds like to me. And so that would help, and I think you can do that in Audacity, can't you?
Yeah, definitely. You can pretty much do everything in that program.
Yeah.
It's pretty sweet.
Well.
Yeah. All right. So I guess pretty much from here, we'll just wrap everything up. I do see a couple questions, and I just want to let these users who have been pushing these questions, let them know that we will answer these questions on the group, just so we don't go too far over time here. I think we said we were going till 1, and it's a little 10 after the hour. But yeah, no, I just want to thank everyone. Well, Tom and I both want to thank everyone for coming. But I want to thank Tom personally for taking the time to get on here and basically just share all this knowledge that he's had from his, what is it, Tom? 33 plus years experience?
No, more like about 44 or something like that.
44 plus. Yeah. With animation, because a lot of the knowledge and the awesome thing is Tom, you can also find him on the Anime Studio Pros group. I mean, there's a ton of different users who also use Anime Studio professionally, that you can also ask questions for as well. Something that you might have noticed if you were coming into the group, or sorry, not into the group, but into the Hangout here, is there's a little thing called Showcase, and I just want to talk a little bit about that. It just kind of shows what I don't know, just kind of what you would think of showcasing. Obviously at the top there, you can see the Anime Studio Pros YouTube channel. That is where we will be posting all kinds of animations and videos and tips and tricks and techniques, either submitted by users or by myself or whoever. So I definitely want you to participate, share some of your tips and trips and oh my gosh, can't talk, tips and tricks, but also to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I also have my Udemy courses, what we talked about a little bit today, character design. I have a 7-hour course specifically for character design. And if you have any questions on rigging, I also have a course there. And these are promotions that you can only find here, because the course itself is actually priced much higher. And then also, if you have had a chance to look at the Facebook page, the Anime Studio Pros Facebook page, there is an option to sign up for the Anime Studio Pros newsletter. And then there you'll, the same thing, be getting more tips and tricks, ideas for your animations, but also promotions. I have old copies of Anime Studio that just kind of sit on my shelf there, and I would love to come up with some kind of contest and kind of give out those serial numbers for those specific versions of Anime Studio. And then here we have at the very bottom, if you're looking at the showcase, we have Tom here. He has on Vimeo. Did you want to describe a little bit, Tom, what you have there on Vimeo for the
Oh,
users?
yeah. Yeah, I did this. It's a video tutorial on how to do a walk cycle in Anime Studio Pro. If you go on into Vimeo and just do a search, I guess, for a walk cycle in Anime Studio Pro, you can sort of find there's a little 2-minute trailer there I made, and it's for rent for just $10, and I think you could probably get a lot out of it. So if what we'd like to know is if people would prefer to buy it, I can set that up too for only $10. Then you'll have it on your hard drive, forever and ever. But anyway, go to Vimeo and check it out.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. All right. So I think that pretty much wraps up this Pro Hangout here. Again, we just want to say thank you so much for joining us for this hour and 15 minutes. And any questions that you may have, definitely feel free to leave them in the group. This video itself will be on YouTube in the next little bit here. This automatically gets uploaded to the Anime Studio Pro's YouTube channel. And well, from Tom and myself, we thank you, and we'll see you next time.